All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the CASBO Confident Communications webinar. We're excited to have you here as you take the next step to strengthen your communication skills and explore our new School Business Communications 101 micro certificate. Today, we're joined by Kwame Christian, attorney, best-selling author, professor, CEO of the American Negotiation Institute, and host of the world's #1 negotiation podcast. Kwame will lead today's conversation. We will open the floor for questions towards the end. You may use the Q&A section or chat box during the webinar for any questions or comments. With that, I turn it over to you, Kwame.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see everybody. Welcome. Let's test something out here. I want to see if the chat is working. Go ahead and just say hi, hello. Let us know where you're coming in from just to make sure the chat is working. And then we will also check out the Q&A too. So everybody, when you have a question, ask the question because most likely somebody else has the same or similar question. Now, Sonia, let me let you into a little strategy here. The reason why I ask people to check out the chat is because now you have no excuse for not engaging. Now I know you're there. Now I know that it works. So I want this engagement to keep on coming in. Okay. So now you all have been caught. But I hope everybody's doing well. I'm excited for this. So the reason why we're kicking this off is because I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to ask me whatever questions about the course is on your mind. But also, let's take this opportunity to use this as a coaching session. I want you to be as selfish as possible. If you have a tough conversation that's coming to mind, ask that question. The harder the question, the better, because most likely somebody else has a similar question that they might be too afraid to ask. So whenever the question comes to mind, just use the Q&A function, which is different from the chat. And then Sonia and Becky will ask those questions later on. So a little quiz here. When it comes to the tough conversations that you have day to day, just difficult conversations in general, what comes to mind? What are some examples, whether it's at home or at work? So either one is legit. So let's see what comes up. So I want to see what examples come up, because the reason why we do this is to show that we're all having the same or similar types of conversations. And once we can get an understanding of where we're all coming from, we can see the utility a little bit clearer. Where to go for dinner. So here's a little insight on this joke. So in every keynote, I always ask this question, and I'll keep people talking until somebody says dinner. It's never breakfast. It's never lunch. It's never snack. Everybody's negotiating about dinner. It's hilarious. So I'm seeing follow through. When you disagree about something, discipline for performance issues, feedback, that's coming up a lot. Fear of rejection. Do you know why we have this fear of rejection? It's because you're human. Think back to our ancestors back in the day. Like I'm talking back when we were living in caves, right? Very simple times, tribal times. What happens if you are ostracized from your group? Just in very simple terms. If you're part of a tribe and you get booted from that tribe, what is your future? What does that look like? You starve and die. Yes, Gene went straight to the answer, right? There's a reason why you're afraid of rejection, because our ancestors that survived were afraid of rejection because that fear was legitimate. But even though the penalties of rejection are not as existential as they used to be, the fear associated with it still feels that way. This is really important. And the thing is, when it comes to analyzing what makes these conversations so hard, a lot of times we start in the wrong place. A lot of times we start with tactics or strategies. What do I need to do? What do I need to say? How do I say it? But we don't get down to the core issue, and it's fear. It's fear of rejection. It's fear of conflict. It's a fear of awkwardness. And if we don't address that element of it, then we're not going to have the conversation. And what I found is that in the communication space, we have been giving recipes to people who are afraid to get in the kitchen. So what I mean is that it's not an issue of not necessarily knowing what to say. It's an issue of not having the confidence to say it when it actually matters. And that's what makes this course so different. Because yes, of course, I'm going to talk about tactics and strategies and how to approach the conversation. But before that, we're going to talk about fear and anxiety, those things that'll hold us back, and then how we can systematically build our confidence. And trivia question, anybody know the difference between fear and anxiety? They're similar, but slightly different. Any guesses here? Physical, there is a physical manifestation. I think that's an important thing. And the more we start to become attuned to the physical manifestations of our emotions, the faster we can catch it. because what's interesting is that the body will show that oftentimes before we perceive it. So that's big. Fear is immediate. There we go. And anxiety is anticipating the future. So fear is about what is happening now. Anxiety is that fear projected into the future. And so sometimes it's fear that holds you back. Okay, there's a slightly different approach for that. Sometimes it's anxiety that holds you back. It's a slightly different approach. So understanding that distinction is important. But again, this is what is often missed when it comes to having these conversations, because we don't address how to overcome fear and how to overcome anxiety. And so the thing that I want to do with this course is I want to make it I want to anticipate a lot of your excuses and address them in the course. So, hey, I'm afraid. Okay, great. We got something for that. Hey, I'm feeling anxiety. We got something for that. I don't feel like I have confidence. Okay, we have something for that. And once we outline how to overcome those psychological and emotional challenges, that's when we get into the actual how to's of the conversation. But again, I recognize something too when it comes to my approach with this. I realize that there's a disconnect between how this is taught and how it's applied. And so there, the folks who are teaching this a lot of times, I'm speaking for myself too. I love teaching this. We are communication nerds. We get into the nitty gritty. It's super exciting for us, but a lot of times we end up inadvertently overcomplicating it for people who just want to know how to have a simple conversation. So I want this to, so this course is designed to be as simple as possible without being simplistic. Because if we can overcomplicate things, then it holds us back from actually having the conversation. And another thing that I found, just for me personally, but also with people that I work with, a lot of times the over intellectualization of these challenges is another manifestation of fear. If we keep on convincing ourselves that this is more complicated than it needs to be, then we give ourselves excuses to not actually step up and have the conversation when it matters, when it actually matters. And so, again, I just want this to be ruthlessly pragmatic, where you could listen to one of the modules and immediately put what you learned into action in your toughest conversations when it actually matters. So I'm getting excited about it, just thinking about it. And I want to get to the questions, but there's one last thing I want to share. So when it comes to my approach, one of the things that makes my approach somewhat different is that in order for me to be effective as a podcast host, I can't just be a negotiation expert. I have to be an expert in negotiation experts. So what I mean by that is that I don't just go in and talk about my own methodologies. I have to learn from the greatest negotiators and communicators in the world. That's my job. We've had over 1,700 episodes with different thought leaders from all around the world. And so it's forced me to dig deeply and understand everybody else's approach. And then I realized that there are commonalities between everybody. So there might be somebody who's in law enforcement, somebody's from academia, somebody who's a relationship therapist, a parenting expert. All of these different people are having tough conversations in different ways. But what we've been able to do with this course is take the core truths from everybody's methodology and synthesize it into one, which is compassionate curiosity. Because the simpler we can get this, the better. So we've created this one methodology where it applies to all of your difficult conversations. So it's not a question of whether or not compassionate curiosity applies. It's a question of how. And when you have it simplified to that level, now you make it a lot easier to flow organically in these conversations. You're not trying to think about different tactics that you could use under the circumstances. You'll realize there's one tactic. It's just a question of how do I apply it with this person. So these are the types of things that you're going to learn in the course. And again, I want you to take this opportunity to use it as like a coaching session. You can ask me anything about the course itself, but you could also ask me any question about difficult conversations you have. And I see we already have 4 questions, which is okay. I think how many people do we have? 337. I know there's more curiosity in there. So let's keep these conversations, the questions coming. And then we'll be out in 21 minutes. So, what is our first question?
All right. Will we be learning how to speak to those that are on a different generational era, as well as those that have different communication style than our own to adapt organically?
Yes, so that is module 6, I believe. So this is when we talk about personality based persuasion. So we have a section where we talk about cross cultural conflict, and we have a section where we talk about the different personality types. So I'm going to use the big 5 personality types as our basis because it doesn't require a test. You can actually make that read pretty closely. So it's the 5 personality types we're going to investigate would be openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Note on neuroticism that we are moving psychologically in the community of psychologists to call it emotional stability because neuroticism sounds like an insult. So just putting that asterisk here. But yeah, we're going to talk about the personalities and culture, and then we're going to talk about generations. I believe generational talking points are in there too. And if not, Sonia, I'm going to look at this again. I have several episodes on intergenerational conflict. So, regardless, you're going to get some expertise on that one way or another. Because the way that you talk to one person in one generation, it's going to switch, it's going to change slightly for somebody else, you know. And I think it's important to respect those differences. And you can still be authentic with the way that you communicate. The things that we're going to talk about through the course will still apply. The psychological underpinnings of everybody is more or less the same. It's just going to be tempered by time, essentially. So when you came into this world, that's going to dictate the culture you were in and slightly adjust the way that we interact with those folks. So I think that's an important call out. Cool. Great question.
All right. The next question is, I am new to my job and asked for a 3-month review, and both my bosses were very surprised that I asked for this. Coming from HR, I thought it was normal to have a 2-month eval and a 5-month evaluation as a new person, but I guess not. I want to ask them how I'm doing, how should I go about doing it, and making sure they know that I feel I have done a great job thus far, but need to know where I'm lacking.
Great question. So let's think about this. I'm a chess nerd, so we'll have many chess analogies, I'm sure. So chess is all about positioning. Your career is all about positioning too, because we want to think about how we can widen our aperture and consider how we can make this conversation more strategically beneficial for us for the long term. So having that conversation about the performance, so you can make your case to make the point that hey, I've been performing well. That's great. That's very important. But then you also want to think about how you could potentially angle this for the future too. So, what are some other things that you can get in this conversation? So, yes, what I would do is first, I would have the conversation, but start focus on curiosity. What are their metrics for success? Because you might think you're successful in these particular ways, and you are, but they might be more moved by your level of success in these other domains that you're doing well, but you might not know to focus on when you're articulating that to them. So first you want to download what it is that they actually care about. So when you're making your case for you performing well, you're speaking their language, not yours. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would want to get an understanding of what they see your future is at this organization. Again, that's leading with curiosity. So what is the next step? Okay, what do I need to do in order to get there? What do you want to see from me? So now in future conversations, when you're having future performance reviews, again, you can make sure that the way that you're positioning yourself is aligned with how they see you and your future too. So I think the strategy that you're using is very, very smart. But now just think a few moves in advance and think about how you could use that conversation, not just to make it clear that you're doing your job at an exceptionally high level, but also that they should start thinking about you for promotions and other opportunities. When it comes to salary negotiation and compensation conversations in general, one of the biggest challenges is that people start the process way too late. The moment you ask for the raise, the negotiation should have happened like months before. You should have been positioning yourself way before. So I think that is an additional strategic layer you could add to that to move that conversation forward. Um, ooh, Marissa has a juicy one. Can I take this one in the chat?
Yes, let's do
Okay.
it.
So the question is, and I'm squinting here. I'm getting older, people. I'm trying my best. So our director wants to move our team out of our office and put us in general open cubicle area. How can we best communicate to him that our team best benefits from having our own space to collaborate? Um, this is a tough one, especially if the ship has already sailed on this. But if it's a situation where there's still room for negotiation, I would start again. You're going to see a pattern here. Figure out what the goal is, because there are probably several unstated goals that go behind that decision. So what is it that you hope to accomplish with this decision? You're asking the person who's making the decision on that. Like, what do you hope to accomplish? Then what you want to do is, with the challenges and concerns that you want to show a couple of things. Number one, how they might not have considered what you are going to bring to the table. And then number two, propose solutions for ways that you can help them accomplish their goals while at the same time accomplishing your goals. And so here's the thing that a lot of people miss. We often turn it accidentally into an argument where it's like they want this and you want that. And so now we're just kind of forcing against each other. But instead, we have to use an empathetic approach. So with empathy, we're focusing on whenever communication experts use empathy, we're not talking about like the feeling side of empathy, because you can have empathy, compassion, and warmth. We're talking more about the strategic side of empathy, which is simply understanding where they're coming from in terms of their perspective, their thoughts around the situation, and their feelings. So how are they thinking? What are their emotions behind it? And then how are they actually seeing this? Because your perspective is going to be different. So you want to find a way for it to be a true win-win. So it doesn't feel like you're coming in to thwart their plans, but you're saying, hey, you might not have considered this. How can we make this a win for both of us? So I think that would be a solid way to push forward. Cool. Great questions. And I see some more coming through the chat, but I know we already have some in place for the Q&A. So I want to respect order there too. So what do we have coming next?
All right, Kwame, how many sessions and how long is each session?
I believe it is it's 6 sessions, 30 minutes each, approximately. Yes. And let me say this too. Your team did a great job of advocating for you, because again, I love this. I would not be done recording if I didn't have those parameters. I just keep on going. So they got a reasonable amount. And I think it's the sweet spot, like the Goldilocks zone for length for this.
All right, next question is, I often get a dead silence when I ask a question that requires a decision in a meeting. How do I push for an answer professionally?
Great. Couple of things. First thing, let's go back to old school politics. We have shuttle diplomacy. So this was introduced in Camp David in presidential politics back in the day when they were negotiating some really heavy international deals. And so you can use that same methodology here, because in that meeting, I wouldn't want you to first introduce that to the decision maker there in the meeting. A couple of reasons why. Number one, when you're having these conversations, remember this. The more people you add to the interaction, the less of a conversation it becomes and more of a presentation. So they're not just calculating the answer to your question, they're weighing the politics of the situation too. So they're saying, okay, I know what the answer is, but I also know who else is at the table. What are their concerns? How do I approach this? How do I frame it in a way that's not threatening to this person, but still truthful to answering your question? You see how complicated it can get really quickly? So beforehand, what I want you to do is I want you to think about who's going to be at the meeting and try to have conversations with them before the meeting. It will be more easy. It will be a lot easier for them to be more vulnerable and open and feel a sense of psychological safety when they don't feel like they're performing at the same time. So you could get a more truthful answer, and an answer that can give you a lot more detail and data before the conversation goes. So I think it might be more or less a bit of a sequencing type of challenge, because the person might not feel safe comfortably answering that vulnerably in front of other people. So in that case, I would just say, take that same question, ask it offline before the conversation. Because when you want to come to those types of interactions, you want to have had those important, crucial conversations before the meeting happens. So you already know where people are aligned, so you can approach the group interaction with a deeper level of precision. So you're not inadvertently stepping on toes. So I think that might be one of the things that holds people back from answering fully and not engaging. But I want to zoom out briefly real quick, because we've had a whole episode on strategic silence. And it's because it's an important element of these tough conversations, but we don't fully appreciate why. And so this doesn't speak to the question that you asked. I know this is a general question that other people have. So I'm kind of just lengthening this a little bit. When you're asking a question, people are thinking, they're processing. And the problem is, a lot of times we are uncomfortable with that silence. And as a result of that, we clarify our question, we let people off the hook, and now we don't get the answer to the question that was coming. So this happens a lot of times if you're talking to an introvert. Introverts need more time to process. They process slower and deeper. Extroverts process quickly and verbally. And so what I do if I'm talking to an introvert is I count. So I might count to five or 10 sometimes before an answer comes, but the answer does come. And sometimes if it's just, forget the personality side, if a person's taking a long time to answer, it might be because you asked a really good question that requires them to shift their perspective in a meaningful way. And the longest that I've waited in a tough conversation was 43 seconds. And it was as excruciating as you would imagine, but it was the catalyst to the shift in the conversation that led to the outcome that we needed. So don't be afraid of silence. It's not always a bad thing. But when you bring in that political element of it, of those conversations, asking that question offline individually might be more optimized for success. Cool. Great question. Cool. What other questions do we have?
All right, how to communicate with the team member who has strong rejections to the leadership.
Oh, an important question would be, are you the leadership that they have strong rejections to? That's important, or just in general? You don't need to answer that, but the answer will change. My answer will change based on that. Let's make it harder. So let's say they have strong rejections to you. In particular, first, what I would do is I would try to reset the relationship when there is nothing at stake. So a lot of times, the only time we talk to certain people is if there's something that is very important to handle. Or sometimes the only reason we talk to people is because we have bad news. And so you look in the mirror and you see yourself, but when they see you, they just see bad news. And so when it comes to that, we have to recognize the reality of bias. And it would be good to have a conversation offline with no stakes to talk about what you both hope the relationship is and how you can essentially renegotiate the relationship in a way that you can have better conversations going forward. I think that's the first thing. We often focus on how we can fix the problem in the conversation, but sometimes it's a deficiency in trust and psychological safety. And we have to remember that trust takes time. It's gained in drips, but lost in buckets. So we have to truly invest in the relationship in order to reset it. And I think the other thing that we have to do too is when it comes to skepticism, I'm coding this as skepticism, the strong rejection of the leader, and the leader's perspective. We should go straight into it to figure out where that comes from, but not in a way that challenges them, in a way that challenges them and creates defensiveness, but in a way that leads with true curiosity. But I would also say that this might be a bit of a personality thing too. When you have, especially on agreeableness, people who are lower on agreeableness seem higher in skepticism and are quicker to reject things too. So it might be a personality thing. So I would investigate to see whether or not this is something that's personalized toward you or the leadership, or something that is generalized. Because if it's something that's more generalized, the module on personality-based persuasion would be important. But if it's something that's more localized, then I think focusing on the modules on trust building and listening would be important. And then focusing on how you can use compassionate curiosity, which is the tool that we teach, to overcome objections. But I think a lot of times, again, we start at the wrong place. Sounds like there needs to be a re-strengthening and an investment in the relationship itself to address the skepticism and rejection that might be coming your way. Great question. Okay, what else
This
do we have?
this question comes from the chat. It says, how do you handle a situation where your boss finds your intelligence and knowledge intimidating, particularly in a situation where you are more skilled and experienced than your boss?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I am thinking, yes, in personality, we do talk about different motivation styles. When we're talking about motivation styles, recognize that power motivation is one of those styles. And when it comes to power motivation, it is the desire to have influence over others. So it doesn't necessarily mean Machiavellian manifestations of it. It could just mean you want to have influence over lots of people. So teachers, for example, are high in power motivation, not for negative reasons, but because of positive reasons they want influence. The reason I say that is because if the person is more on the Machiavellian side, where they want power in terms of control, that breed of power motivation is often threatened by people who might seem to be future rivals. So I think one of the things that we want to do in that is when we're having the conversation with somebody like that, we want to make sure that we are coding our approach not in terms of what they should do, but in terms of curiosity. Not curiosity, sorry, in terms of advice. You're asking for advice. So you'll use the exact same frameworks that we're going to talk about, but you're going to frame it in terms of advice. So you're going to say, hey, I'm running into this problem. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. How would you approach this? They might suggest something that you've already done. And then you say, actually, that's a really good idea. Interestingly, I tried that and I ran into this problem. Considering that, how would you approach it? You know, and so I think one of the things is when it comes to finding our own source of power and legitimacy within conversations, a lot of times, especially if we're going up against somebody who is more threatened by competence and intelligence, you might want to say, frame it in terms of your competence and intelligence is focused on your boots on the ground perspective. It's like, it's not that I'm smarter than you. It's that I am closer to this in a way that you are not. And so I need your wisdom in order to address this, and then I'll tell you what I'm seeing. And so it's a slight change in tone and approach, but essentially the underlying, the psychological underpinnings of the approach are exactly what we're going to talk about in the course, but you just change the frame slightly because you don't want to threaten somebody who is really focused on not just having power, but maintaining that power. You don't want to seem as a threat. Robert Greene talked about this in the 48 Laws of Power. I think this was like, don't threaten the royalty. You know, you just don't want to be on the wrong side of somebody who wants that power. So great question.
How do you address an issue if someone is refusing to take accountability and is looking to blame others?
So how do you address an issue if you're dealing with a human? That's what I'm hearing. That's how we tend to be. So yeah, this, first of all, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that we have inappropriate expectations. Most people are not like, they haven't done the work. You know, so I would be more surprised if somebody was willing to take accountability and responsibility. So I think that's just one little thing. It sounds pessimistic, but it's just more realistic. The other thing is, let me cite my friend Sheila Heen from Crucial Conversations: shift from blame to contribution. Blame makes it seem like it's 100%, 0%, but contribution is a division of percentages. So let me explain. So if I am approaching this and I say, you did this wrong and you did this wrong and that wrong, it sounds like I'm 100% blaming them and nobody else has any responsibility. But if you shift from blame to contribution, you could just say, hey, listen, we're encountering this problem and I want to see what we could do differently going forward. What are some things that you've seen? Again, letting them share what they say. Okay. Validating that, showing that we understood, and then talk about some of the problems that you've seen from their side. And I think you don't, one of the benefits isn't, one of the tools that you want to do is to utilize is not really personalizing it, saying you did this. It's more like this was done. Now, what can we do about it? So as long as you make sure that it's number one, problem solving in nature, you still use a collaborative approach, but say, talk about contribution, that's a better way to do it. And one thing that I often do to make the person feel safe showing their contribution is I share what I could have done differently. Because even if the person messed up completely, I could say, oh, listen, I came into this with some inappropriate assumptions and I could have done a better job of explaining this. And so I want to hear from your perspective, your experience, so we could work together better. So it's just a little shift semantically that makes a big difference. If it seems like you're blaming them, they will reject it 100%. But if you can shift from blame to contribution, I think that's a good way forward. Great question.
Right. On evaluation, supervisors sometimes indicate meets expectations because there is always room for improvement. Even though verbally employee is told you go above their expectations, what would be a good approach to have it changed from meets to exceeds on the evaluation form?
That's a great question. And again, I think one of the things that I've found a lot of great negotiators do exceptionally well is ask the seemingly stupid question, you know? And I think the easiest way to do it is talk to your manager and say, hey, listen, I know I've been getting meets expectations, but hypothetically, this is one of the most powerful ways to ask a question because it doesn't commit the person to an answer. You're just saying, hey, hypothetically, in a fanciful world that doesn't exist, if I were to get exceeds expectations, what would you need to see from me in order to know I exceeded expectations. Great, get their answer. Okay, good. And then how would you know that it's true? So now I'm getting evidence. I don't just want what you would want to see, but I also want to know what you would consider legitimate evidence to prove this to you. Fantastic. Great. Now I got this down. Then I'm going to follow up with an email to say, hey, I love this conversation, just to make sure I'm recapping everything right. Seems like this is what it means if we might meet expectations. In order to exceed expectations, you would need to see this by this date. Did I get that right? Fantastic. Great. So now when I go to the next performance review, now I can say with specificity, in our last conversation, you said if I do these things, I would get exceeds expectations. Here is the evidence. So can we confirm that I've exceeded expectations? I think that's a simple way to reverse engineer it. Cool. Can we get one more? It's 3:30, but I'm having fun.
Sure, we'll do one more. Let's
Go.
see.
You see, I negotiated that, peeps. I always get
Um, all right, how to reply to direct rude employees without reacting.
So we had to get a tough one. So first of all, I think when it comes to emotion management, the work that needs to be done for emotion management starts beforehand. I think this is something that is not fully appreciated yet. The best way to manage your emotions in a tough conversation is to lower your overall baseline level of emotionality. So I wanted you to feel like give yourself license to do things that are fun, things that are enjoyable, like meditation, relaxing, working out, puzzles, whatever it is that helps. And if you're specifically thinking about emotion management for a specific challenge, journaling is great. We have a whole process in how to utilize journaling and emotion management for those situations. So that's where we need to start. During the conversation, the way that I've actually formulated compassionate curiosity, which is the tool that we'll use for all of our difficult conversations, it's designed not only for the external conversation, but also the internal conversation with yourself. So how do I negotiate with myself to manage my own emotions? So I'm going to label all of my emotions, and I will label the emotions. I'll figure out where they're coming from, and then I'll actually go into the conversation. You can do this for emotional preparation for the conversation, and you can actually start to do it during the conversation to respond effectively in that moment. I think just taking a pause is important. You hear so many people talk about the power of the pause, but they don't talk about what goes into the pause. So we actually have the framework, but just touching it briefly, you want to focus on managing your breathing. The more stressed out you get, the more shallow your breathing becomes. So taking deeper breaths in that moment is a good way to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system and calm yourself down. Label the emotions and then figure out how you're going to revisit the conversation. So I think a very simple framework is label what it is that you heard from them, acknowledge and validate those emotions, and then ask questions to get them to dig deeper. Because usually if somebody is responding with rudeness, that means that there's an emotional issue that is underlying this. And if you respond logically to somebody who's emotionally, it doesn't work. We've all been in situations where we have conversations and it seems like facts don't work anymore. And that's why we have to not just manage our own emotions, but understand what emotional challenges they're having in the conversation and address that first. So you keep yourself calm, learn how to calm them down, and then address the conversation in a meaningful way. Cool. Awesome. Well, listen, if you like this, the course is better. Okay, so in the course, both of my lights work, so you're in for a treat. But I really hope that you enjoy the course, and as you go through it, I want you to think as selfishly as possible. Yes, this will help your career, but if you don't look at this and understand how you could use this to improve your relationships with your loved ones, your family and friends, then I missed the mark on that too. So I'm excited for you all to go on this journey.
Sweet. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Kwame. You will receive a follow-up email with this recording and additional details regarding our newest MicroCert program. We also have a new discounted registration rate when you sign up with a team of 5 or more staff from the same district. Check it out and join us for the next cohort. If you have any follow-up questions, please email us at pd@casbo.org. Bye, all.